The Mesa Chamber of Commerce Inside Business Podcast brings you a unique view of Mesa through its vibrant business community and the subjects that are important. The podcast is produced in the Mesa Chamber of Commerce Media Studio, sponsored by the University of Phoenix. Our podcast is hosted by Mesa Chamber of Commerce CEO Sally Harrison. Please enjoy this episode of the Mesa Chamber Inside Business Podcast.
Hi, I'm Sally Harrison, president of the Mesa Chamber of Commerce, and today I have Scott Smith, former mayor of Mesa, who is now running again for that seat, joining me. Thank you for being here.
Thank you for having me. You have the former and hopefully the future.
Yes.
That's good.
Yes.
F and F.
We were planning on that.
Well,
Yes.
Good.
Yeah. I appreciate you coming in. I know you're busy right now, but we have endorsed you, so I wanted to...
Thank you very much for that.
You are welcome. The Chamber has put a lot of effort into our process, but I wanted to do a little more deep dive into your campaign and you and what you see in the future for Mesa. So let's do a little history. Let's talk about you. I know you have had a varied background. So let's hear about it. And why are you running for Mesa mayor again?
Well, I have lived in Mesa for most of my life.
Mm-hmm.
I actually grew up was born in Tucson, and I moved to Mesa when I was in the 6th grade because my father became superintendent of schools in Mesa,
Yes.
a position he held for 17 years. And Mesa was an amazing place to grow up, and I've chosen to live here and raise my family. So for over 50 years, I've called Mesa home.
Mm-hmm.
Started businesses, endeavors, done a lot of different things, but I've always appreciated what this community has done for me, the opportunities it's given me, the environment, the culture, and that's why I'm running. I love this city. I love its people, its history, its culture, what it's been, and most of all, what it still can become.
Yeah. So talk a little bit more about your actual background. I mean, you have degrees in certain things that I think tie into why you would be a good mayor, right?
I hope so.
You've run big businesses.
Throughout my life, I think I got it from my mother more than my father, even though he was in education. A love of learning, and I learned early on that when you learn, and knowledge is truly power. When you know things and experience things, you're prepared to handle anything. So I went to college, planning on getting a law degree right out of college, and I because my brother-in-law had a background in accounting, he said, "Hey, go into accounting." So I got an undergrad in accounting and went to work for Price Waterhouse, the big at the time Big 8 accounting firm. And spent 4 wonderful years there. I learned so much, and learned how to do things right in a professional manner, which prepared me for everything I've done.
Yeah.
And after that, I went out and wanted to decide whether accounting was my real calling. I did other accounting, worked for a local firm, did some consulting, did things like that, and never really found my niche. And as a matter of fact, I hit the end of the 80s in the first mini Great Recession, the S&L crisis. And through my practice, I had developed an expertise in real estate. And of course, the S&L crisis was all about real estate. And so I was faced with a myriad of clients who were having problems. And I developed a dual expertise in Internal Revenue Service workout, or offers and compromise, and in bank loan workouts. So in other words, my clients couldn't pay the government and couldn't pay the banks.
Hopefully you got paid.
No. That was the bad business. And I decided at that time I needed not only a change in job, I needed a career change. As I said, I had originally wanted to go to law school. I never did. But at age 37, with 3 kids and a mortgage, I decided to jump back in and make a big change and go to law school.
Wow.
And I went to law school at ASU. And it was one of the hardest things, but one of the best things I've ever done. I never actually ended up practicing law, but that degree and that experience has prepared me. So I was a CPA for 25 years. I have a law degree, and in my businesses, I practiced a lot of law, and so it prepared me for that. Well, one of the things it did is while I was still in law school, I had a client who had been funded by some European money to buy up resolution trust properties from this S&L crisis. And he told me, "Listen, I really need you to work full time." I was just consulting on a part-time basis. I said, I will come to work for you, but I really need to finish law school." He goes, "Finish law school?" Yeah. And here's what I didn't tell him. I was so poor at the time I couldn't afford to pay my next year's tuition. Now, mind you, at this time ASU was pretty cheap. I was paying like $700 a semester to go to law school, and I couldn't afford that. We were really just struggling to get by. And he said, "Sure, why not?" So he went on full time with this local developer, and he paid my last year's law school.
Nice.
Unfortunately, the people who raised money in Europe did some pretty rotten stuff, and before I knew it, the FBI was banging on the door.
Oh, bummer.
Yeah, asking questions, and I'm brand new. I didn't know what was going on.
Yeah.
But what it did is it led to the fact that the founders and even my friend had to exit the company, and I was the CFO, so I became the default CEO.
Wow.
That's how I got into home building.
I had no idea. That's a great story.
Well,
or a sad story.
I went in there because I still hadn't finished law school, remember? And the idea was I was going to wind down the company and liquidate it. And I said, well, I've got another semester of law school, so it's going to be a slow wind down. As it turns out, that was right when the building, the real house home building boom, another one, happened in Metro Phoenix. Took advantage of that and started building this home building company.
That's awesome.
I ended up having the U.S. government as my largest shareholder because those who raised money in Europe forfeited their stock when they were convicted of a felony.
Yeah.
And 5 years later, I negotiated with the 600 German shareholders I had and the U.S. government to buy the company.
Wow, what a story.
And I bought the home building company, and we ended up growing it from virtually nothing to building over 1,000 homes a year.
Wow.
And ended up getting an offer from a New York Stock Exchange home building company to sell, which I did. That was the first time I retired. And that's when I ran for mayor. First time.
So that would have been how many years ago?
That was 2008 that I ran for mayor.
And you ended up leaving that?
Mesa has a 2-term limit, and we accomplished a lot. And in the middle of my second term, there was a gubernatorial election. And I looked at it, and I talked to others, and I just figured it was a good time to perhaps do something at the state level. I ran for governor, had to resign under state law as mayor a couple of years early. But we'd accomplished what I'd wanted to accomplish. I mean, I look at what we were able to do in 6 years. We navigated the Great Recession.
Right.
Took Mesa, and we ended up much better off because while we, and this came from my business experience, while we handled the challenges of the Great Recession, we set the foundation for a better future. We kept the Cubs from going to Naples, Florida. Brought the Oakland Athletics in.
Yeah.
We brought Apple computers to Mesa. I've never done more national interviews
I can imagine.
than when Apple came. We hosted the pivotal presidential debate in the Republican 2012.
Yeah.
Things that no one ever imagined Mesa, Arizona would do.
Right.
And we literally had the greatest economic boom and job growth in the city's history, and I think it was all because of the way we handled the worst financial crisis we ever had.
Yeah.
And I was proud of that. And one of the reasons I'm running now is I'm very grateful that I was part of laying the foundation for something which I believe helped Mesa continue to succeed. But there's still unfinished business. I still want to do stuff.
Well, let's talk about that. What are your biggest priorities when you return to the mayor's office?
Well, one thing I want to do is, first of all, continue our upward slope. Mesa's had a lot of good successes. We've attracted a lot of investment. In some ways, I think we need to not focus so much on quantity of growth and refocus on quality of growth. That happens when you get a surge of people moving in and that. And we just need to remember the things that really made a difference where we are. We've evolved and matured as a city, and our residents, I think, have reasonable expectations that when someone invests in Mesa, they're going to invest in quality, things that last more than 5 years.
Yeah,
they last 5 generations. I also think that people expect the city to be a partner, a facilitator. Government is really good at regulating. And especially small businesses, people who don't have that expertise, they find it increasingly difficult to do business. And it pains me when I hear, and I have heard a lot of business who tell me Mesa is full of red tape now, and it's getting tougher and tougher. That's I believe is one of my top priorities, is to see what we can do to get back to the mode and the culture of service and facilitating success, not regulating that at all.
Well, so you're talking my language. I love when we talk about business, and I do think that there are some struggles, especially with small businesses. We're watching them shut their doors. They're closing down. So talk about what some of the things that you think the city could do to help small businesses be more successful.
Well, as I said, a lot of it is cultural. A lot of it is when you walk into the city office to file a permit, an application, whatever. What is the attitude you're met with? And this is something we can easily change. I know that because we did it before. And this is where the facilitate, don't regulate. Insurance companies and others and government are good at starting a no and saying, here, make me go to yes. And that's sort of backwards. Government should say, okay, what do you want to do? How can I help you succeed? That doesn't mean we ignore rules. It doesn't mean we ignore process.
Right.
But if the attitude from the moment a business walks in is, I'm going to help you because I'm here to serve you, it's amazing the changes in the experience.
They're public servants.
They're public servants. They're nothing to be feared. I want
Yeah.
people to be able to walk in and say, I want to go see the city of Mesa because I know that there are things I don't understand, especially if I'm a small business, and they're going to help me to get through that. We're not going to do the work for them. But for example, I learned when I was a home builder that when you bring a plan in, they will use a red pen to mark all the things that you've done wrong.
Right.
And one of the reasons I ran the first time is that we had an experience, unfortunately, with the city of Mesa where we brought in a plan, and it was, we call it bleeding red. There was a lot of problems on it. And so we went to the plan checker and we said, okay, could you explain to me why this is wrong? He said, no. What can we do to fix it? I can't tell you that.
Whoa.
What? Why not? Well, we've been told that we would take on liability. I go, no. You tell me it's wrong, but you can't tell me the simple thing I need to do to fix it.
That makes no sense.
That just sent me off the edge. And that's one of the main reasons I ran for mayor. I never wanted that to happen.
Yeah.
So if I do, I have no problem when a city employee looks at something and says, this doesn't follow regulations, building code, whatever it is, and points it out. But I also want the follow-up to say, listen, you missed this, but if you do this, you should be able to do it. Check with your attorney, engineer, whoever it is.
Right.
But here's, get people on the way to success. We'll find that people are much more likely to walk in and have the city involved, which they have to be,
Sure.
than if they feel that they're a gigantic roadblock, obstacle. And that's what I'm hearing way too much of right now.
Yeah.
So that's one of the first things I want to look at. And then, of course, public safety. We talk about that. It's really tough in at least police, especially policing.
Yeah.
Mesa's been somewhat fortunate, knock on wood, that we haven't had the kind of shortage. Phoenix, I think, is 700-800
Right.
officers short.
That's what I've heard.
They're having a very difficult time. Mesa still has a hard time recruiting high quality people, but we're doing better than others. But I want to really look and see what, and offer up to our especially our police department, what do you need from us as city leaders to ensure that we can have a top notch, high quality police and fire department, recruit and hire the highest quality people, retain them, give them the world-class training and the equipment and tools and resources they need to succeed.
That's great. Well, we have great leadership in our public safety. I think we have the best we've had probably. And in the size city that we're in, we should demand that.
I agree with you, and I'm very impressed with the leadership we have. I think the fact that, and I'm going to knock on wood here, that we have handled challenges, and we've all had challenges in our police departments, but the way I think in which they've handled them, especially recently, is admirable. I want to ensure that kind of response and that kind of trust that the citizens have in their police department not only continues, but it increases and expands. That's a goal should be a goal for all of us. Because if the citizens in a community are not confident or believe they're safe, nothing else works.
Well,
It all starts with that, and that's the city's primary responsibility, which is why 3/4 of our budget is dedicated to police, fire, and the courts.
Right.
Is because it is our number one obligation. And
Not everybody talks about courts when they talk about public safety.
Yeah.
I think people are missing out on that conversation.
Exactly, and we have a very accomplished municipal court system. Once others that other cities come and try to emulate, they learn from them, and we need to give them the support to make sure that everybody's experience with the city of Mesa, especially public safety, is at the highest, most professional level, and that's something we should all aspire. And it's our job as electeds to encourage innovation. We just don't give them blank checks,
Right.
Because if you give people blank checks, they get complacent, and complacency has no place in public safety. You always have to be innovative. You always have to be on the cutting edge, and our departments, police, fire, and courts, have been very good at that. I want to make sure we continue that and expand at that.
I love when things get announced, and we heard about the Veterans Court system, and then the community court piece coming in. It's fun to watch and hear those things and see those things in action, and then know that other communities are looking at us saying, "Oh, what's Mesa doing?"
Oh, it's part of learning is being innovative. You should never feel comfortable where you are.
Yeah.
And I said, the old saying is, if you're growing, you're never comfortable. If you're comfortable, you're not growing. Well, I think that extends and complies with the community and with government too.
Sure.
We should always be pushing ourselves. Now, we have a different role than business, but we should always push ourselves to be innovative and find new and better ways of doing things, because that's how we best serve the public.
Yeah. All right. So talk about education. I know it's important to you. How does that fit into your plans as mayor?
Well, some other my opponents even don't realize that the city of Mesa does not run the school system in Mesa.
Right.
It's a very different thing, and we don't run the K-12 system. We don't run the community colleges or the university system, but we are obviously very, very much involved, and we are partners.
Good partners.
We're good.
Yeah.
We need to be good partners.
Yeah.
And the reason we need to be good partners is really a very self-serving reason.
Workforce?
Workforce. Not only workforce, but a qualified workforce.
Yes.
On all levels.
Yeah.
And a qualified workforce means you'll have more investment. When you have more investment, people can grow and stay here. I don't want people to leave. I tell my friends when I explain economic development, especially my women friends, I said, listen, I want your grandkids to be able to live in Mesa. And not have to go somewhere else to find their career, their career opportunities. I want them to be able to grow in place, and you can't do that without an educated workforce.
Right.
An educated workforce also creates economic activity, which increases taxes, which actually a more highly educated workforce creates less demands on public safety.
Sure.
It attracts the kind of investment that elevates lifestyle and elevates the quality of life at all levels. This isn't just a rich thing, it's at all levels.
Sure.
As a mayor, that's a win-win-win proposition. So we should be deeply involved and concerned about the success of our educational institutions. There are 4 school districts, people don't realize this, that operate in Mesa a lot. There's a 5th that actually takes in a little chunk, but it doesn't really operate much. We, of course, have EVIT, which I would really like to see us expand our technical and vocational training. Those are the blue-collar success stories in the future. And even during the depths of the Great Recession in the U.S., we had over 2 million unfilled trained high-wage positions, mostly machinists, things like that aren't college degree, but they need some sort of post-secondary education. We have our we have our 2 community colleges that operate here, Mesa Community and Chandler Gilbert, and then of course we have our universities, which we are seeing expanding their presence, and I just want all of our citizens to have that opportunity available and to know that they can stay in Mesa and get the education they need and want, so they can hopefully stay in education in Mesa after they graduate.
That would be a really good plan for everybody. We need them to stay here.
And the city has a role in that, and we've done a good thing with Promise Mesa now, Mesa Counts on College that started out, Promise Mesa, which provides opportunities for those who otherwise might not be able to extend their education past high school.
I just did a podcast with them earlier this week, and we talked about the fact that they now have adult learners, which I did not realize until that podcast.
Learning never ends.
Yes.
And as I've found out, I'm now, I think, on my 6th career, not job, but career. Learning never ends and opportunity never ends.
Yeah.
And so I don't think that just because you graduate from high school, junior college, or college, that your education has ended or your opportunities. So everybody should have the opportunity to expand, and knowledge is how you do that.
Well, thank you for that. Talk about your thoughts on the housing crisis.
It's the number one thing we hear about, and it's probably the biggest change in this state and this community in the last 20 years. I remember at one time, it used to actually somewhat upset me, is because we'd go out into the country and we would advertise that Metro Phoenix was a cheap place to do business. We were cheaper than California and everywhere else, and part of that was because of our housing prices. Low taxes, but housing was a big thing. We're not there anymore.
Yeah.
We have now risen to the middle of the pack, and we're no longer a cheap place to live and do business, and that it should be concerning for everybody, and it is. And as I've said, as I talk to people, their biggest concern is that their kids won't have the opportunity to own houses.
Yeah.
And their grandkids, and they'll be pushed out of the market and will become another California type market. We are tens of thousands of units below building and providing below our growth and below the need. And there's a lot of reasons for that. I think we need to get more creative. As a home builder, I focused on interesting pieces of property, mostly infill, places where people wouldn't build. We got very creative. We actually had to work with 5 or 6 cities around the valley to change their zoning and subdivision to allow us to build things that you see everywhere now. Cluster homes, multi, not apartments, but duplex, triplex, doing it in an innovative way. There's a lot of underutilized property in Mesa. A lot of it is not zoned currently for residential. Excess parking lots, unused commercial that strip centers that have seen better days.
I was just going to say, there's a lot of strip malls that,
yeah, they're boarded up, or they have 1 or 2 tenants, and I'd like to get creative. And here's how you do it, though. Because these are zoned commercial, you can't go in and just build residences in them. But the worst thing to do is to go in and just change that zoning to residential, because what that will do is it'll create a bidding war for the land, and there's no way you can build workforce housing that I would call, we call it affordable, I call it workforce housing. When you just change to residential, say, okay, now, because you now have 10 people coming and trying to bid it.
Sure.
If increasing the housing stock is our goal, we need to increase the land. It all gets down to dirt, is what I say. It's all about dirt. Having the dirt in which to build housing, we like to focus on housing that is to own. That's where you get the most stability. We'll build plenty of apartments, but we need to have houses that people can build. But I'd like to give an incentive, and I haven't figured out exactly how this will work, but to take that commercial property and to say, all right, we will, as an incentive, you're not going to use that property as commercial. That's obvious because you're not using it now. We need this as residential. If you will build residential, here's what we will do. And it's sort of a provisional zoning and permitting that basically eliminates the market auction on that. And one of the things is we want you to build workforce housing there. Economically, it will work because we're going to allow you to use underutilized property. I know we can make that work, and I know then at that point in time, if people will agree to build a certain type of housing that is owned and attracts young buyers and other buyers, and the typical workforce type of thing, that we can expand our housing stock. That in and of itself is not going to solve it. Things like ADUs, better known as casitas, granny flats, that may help. But there were so many exemptions in the state law. For example,
we just talked about that this morning.
If you're in an HOA, you can't build. Your HOA can tell you can't build that. That law made a lot of. There was a lot of talk about the law. I don't think it's going to have a significant. There are things we can do as a city. Forget about state law to encourage and to allow additional housing stock to come into the market, not to be short-term rentals, not to be just another apartment complex. We can do that. I'd love to, with my background and everything, I'd love to start to explore those opportunities.
Well, if anybody could figure that out, I bet it's you.
There's a lot of smarter people than I am, and I will tell you, I learned one thing in business, especially in home building. there's only so many solutions to any problem. There are multiple solutions. I don't have the answers. First of all, I want to ask all the questions because I want to learn.
Sure.
The second thing is I'm not afraid. I've never stolen an idea from anybody, but I've been inspired by many.
I like that.
Yeah.
That's a good term.
I tell people, in building houses, I never stole anybody's plan, but boy, I was inspired by many. I have no problem with borrowing really good ideas. Especially when someone's put it in place and they've gone through all the growing pains, and we get to learn from their mistakes. Yeah. And that's the first thing I want to do, which is why I'm very active in organizations such as the U.S. Conference of Mayors. It's really good to go back to this meeting of mayors nationally and listen to the solutions that other cities have come up with. And I brought back a lot of great ideas from talking with other mayors from around the country. We're not in an island.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of great thinking going on in other parts of the country that we can learn from, and I want to do that.
Bring those ideas back and tweak them to fit the Mesa way.
We'd love to do it.
Yeah. So we talked about the chamber obviously gave you our endorsement for mayor, which we are very honored to do that. Endorsements are very important to a candidate. I know you have some other endorsements. You want to tell me about those?
I am honored that the Chamber of Commerce chose to endorse me. I have what I would call the big four, and I really appreciate that. These are organizations that are respected in the community. They're noticed in the community. The Chamber of Commerce is always up there in the top three.
I appreciate that.
Well, because people understand and they believe the Chamber's working on their behalf. So receiving that endorsement was a great honor for me. I also am the only mayor for candidate that has received the endorsement of the Firefighters Association and the Mesa Police Association.
Wonderful.
That was an interesting endorsement because I'm running against somebody who actually was a firefighter. And I asked them, so okay, it's a brotherhood.
Yeah.
And they told me something interesting in the endorsement. They said, we worked with you. We worked with you during the depths of financial crisis where everybody was stressed. We went without a fire academy for like 3 years.
Yeah.
We froze pay. Those are not normally things that gain you friends.
Sure.
And yet they said, we got to know you, working with you. You always communicate with us, and we trust you. To me, that was one of the greatest compliments ever.
It's a big thing.
It was a big thing, especially when your relationship started out in a moment of crisis.
Sure.
When you didn't agree on things.
Yeah. Well, trust is, I think, it's key to
every
relationship, right?
And I told them, listen, we're going to go through this time, and we're not going to agree on everything. You have your interest, and I respect that. Yeah. I look after the whole city, and sometimes those interests will collide. They'll be in conflict. I only promise you one thing. I will always talk to you, and I'll listen, and I'll tell you where we stand and why I stand. And therefore, if we are in a different position, you'll understand where I'm coming from. The fourth big endorsement I got was from the realtors, the West Valley and the Southeast Valley Realtors Association we serve. Yeah. They're out there more than almost anybody.
Sure.
In the market
now.
Yeah, especially now. Yeah. And they hear from their members, and I'm excited to hear from them about especially when housing is such a big issue, an important issue. I'd love to work with them to once again to learn, to hear what's really going on in the marketplace.
Well, hopefully everyone understands that organizations like what you just described, we do a lot of work. We put a lot of effort into the process to make those decisions and announce those endorsements. It's not just, we know about this person, or, we believe this about this person. There's panels, there's interviews, there's a process, and we stick to that. And I think that's what makes it work for us. But we do it, in our case, through a business lens. And so, we're always looking at who's the best candidates that will represent and support our businesses. So,
and I appreciate that. That's why I'm honored. Simple, right? I appreciate the process. I also have gained a special appreciation recently because now that we're getting more into the meat of the thing, these endorsements, always a positive for me, are being attacked by my opponents. Of course, they attack the process because they didn't get the endorsement. So they try to diminish the endorsement, which tells me that it is important.
Yeah.
I believe it's important because the time we have to sit down with these groups and answer the questions, go before panels like we did here with the Chamber, and are asked tough questions. And it's hard to hide. And I appreciate that.
Yeah.
And to get affirmation that through from a group that your vision is something that's attractive to them, that they trust, there's a level of trust there that you're going to live up to it. That to me is very important. And I find it really interesting that people said, well, what did you do to buy the endorsement?
Oh, Lord.
Yeah. And well, yes, when you're opponents, that's what they say. And I go, well, what I did to buy is I went in and answered a multi-page deal, which draws out the most. You can't, avoid that.
Well, you don't know the questions ahead of time
and then
either,
followed up with an interview in front of a panel, and that's what I did. And there are things that I don't agree with the organizations on.
Sure.
That if it weren't that way, I would not trust the process. But once again, I think all of these organizations want to go to the same place I do. They want to build a better Mesa.
Exactly.
We may have different ideas of what road to take.
Yeah.
And that's where you have your conversations, but they're all focused on making a better community.
Yeah.
And as long as I can associate with people and organizations that want to end up in the same place I do, which is a better Mesa, I can work with anybody and look forward to working with them, and we'll work through our differences to come to common ground.
Yeah.
That's what I enjoy doing. I think when you look at my first term as mayor, that's what I was successful in doing. And I believe that's why I was able to get the endorsement of all these groups. They have good memories, and they recognize this is not just a nostalgia tour.
No,
I'm not living in the past, but I'm taking what I learned and what I experienced and applying it to our current and future problems and opportunities.
Well, before we wrap up, early ballots are getting mailed out in what?
July 3rd.
Yeah.
So people will get them in the
week and a
mail
half.
the 5th or the 6th.
2 weeks, yeah.
Less than 2 weeks.
Okay,
They're
so
going
early
in the mail.
ballots are very important.
Well, in Mesa and in elections, 85% of this people who vote will vote via early ballot.
Yes.
So the election really begins a week from about a week and a half from now.
Yeah.
When people start getting those ballots right after the 4th of July.
Right.
So it's important.
So very important. Obviously, we see your signs out, but how can somebody learn more about you? I assume you have a website.
Have a website, scottsmithformayor.com. And they can go and Google. You can find out all you want, even the ugliest thing that people say. Go to the website. Follow us on
all the social media.
All the social media.
Yeah.
We also have TV ads out, which talk a lot about public safety and small business and my commitment to that.
Yes.
And just if you see me anywhere, I love interacting. I will never turn down the opportunity to talk about me and my visions for Mesa with any voter. And I've been able to do that in the last couple weeks as things have heated up, both in the weather and in the campaign. And I really enjoy doing that. So just search us out.
Well, thank you for being here, and I'm sure that we will be in touch in the next couple of weeks, especially. But I appreciate you and all you're doing for Mesa.
And I appreciate you and the work that you've done here with the Chamber and the growth in the Chamber and the support of the Chamber and its members. And just remember, tell a friend, 2, 3, 4, 5. A lot of people aren't aware that this election is coming on, and it's important. What your city does affect you on a daily basis more than any other level of government. So this is an important election. So tell a friend or 2.
Local
Vote Scott
elections
Smith.
are important. Yes.
Yes. Vote for Scott Smith.
Thank you.
Thanks.
This has been a Mesa Chamber of Commerce Inside Business podcast. You can find all podcast episodes at iTunes, Spotify, or your own favorite podcast website. You can also find them online at mesachamber.org. Content of this podcast is copyright the Mesa Chamber of Commerce, unless otherwise noted.